All right, hello everyone. It's tough to follow such a good immersive act with back to some technical discussion. It's really cool to be presenting in this planetarium. You can tell how much fun all of the speakers and audience are having. That's very memorable. I'm going to be talking about Teleport. We're a product studio that is up and coming that does consumer products. We're being incubated by Flashbots. The impetus for this comes from really two main observations. One is a critique of blockchain that I've shared with my colleague Xinyuan at Flashbots, which is that for all of the exciting work that blockchain is doing, we can't help but feel a bit of a lack of imagination among all of the potential that this great tech has. It's really good that we've excited a whole new generation of builders that have very exciting cypherpunk values through and through. Basically ignited a whole adoption of a whole range of good cryptography techniques, but a little bit stuck in the limited view of just digital assets and finance. Really, we should be taking the cypherpunk values to other areas, embracing an entire decentralized lifestyle as well. The other impetus for this came from, I've reordered these a little bit, and I want to start here for this point. We had these really cool discussions about TEs, and TEs are like the worst technology ever. Mostly what you hear about them is that they are continuously broken, and that's really true. Basically, it's kind of tough. I have a background in cryptography, and so I used to join the voices saying, why would you even try to be using TEs when zero-knowledge proofs exist? You should be sticking to cryptography, which is backed by math, rather than trust in manufacturers and trust in nebulous views of what hardware can do. And it's kind of gets boring as a security researcher to keep saying, oh, what you already think you have, actually you can't not have it. That's not a message that anyone really likes hearing. And it's also really cool to be hearing the discussions. I think the discourse has evolved a lot. I really like what SpaceComputer is doing, and any of the people contributing to the trustless TE effort are trying to actually make the trusted hardware that does what everyone wants TEs to do. So that's a really good, productive change. That's actually building the future that we need to have and that we really want. So that's extremely important work, but it's a little bit further out. The TEs that we have now are not secure against physical attacks. They do strongly rely on the support of the operators of them, and essentially a trust model that relies on trusting the manufacturers and the operators to do the right thing. And so it's kind of disappointing, and it's unfun as a security researcher to saying, oh, you already have these cool products, you're doing this, so you just can't have what you think you already have. So this came from a bit of like, if you can't beat it, join them. What's shown here on this slide is not only do every hardware manufacturer of processors, so Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA as well, they have TE execution modes built into their server processors. So they're already distributed on the server processors that are out there. Also, all of the cloud providers have confidential VM offerings. So you can launch a confidential VM supported by the cloud operators that runs on top of the confidential execution mode that the hardware providers have built into their processors. And this is even being acknowledged by the AI providers. So all the AI providers have at least some white paper that explains that confidential compute is the future. We want to be able to provide private inference. Obviously, you don't want to have to rely on just the good word of an AI provider to keep your data private. So, this trend is just like a flood that's keeping going. So, the attitude of that is like, if we're going to be, putting ourselves in the mindset that maybe in the future, hardware will actually deliver the trust model that we need from these. And in the meantime, all of the big industry players are offering these tools for people to use anyway. At least we should be using these to excite our imagination and not just use them as a cheaper way of doing zero-knowledge proofs, like as an excuse to be lazy and skimp out on your cryptography, but instead to do something completely different that you wouldn't be able to do anyway. So just rewinding a bit until this makes sense. So the 2 points that I will then make today is that we should be using TEs as the appropriate technology to do new kinds of app development that you wouldn't have thought of being able to do before. And in particular, one of the areas that's really promising for us to turn our Web3 sense of decentralization and disruptive innovation to is the world of social media and algorithmic recommendations. So this is a really important place to bring the cypherpunk manifesto and set of values because it's a place where it's sorely needed. So all of the doom scrolling platforms from Twitter, but especially the short form videos like Instagram Reels, and TikTok especially, all right, this is where there are a whole, billions of users, all right, it's captured the attentions, for better or worse, probably mostly worse, of all of the youth. And these are also settings that if you're used to breaking down problems in a Web3 sense are kind of familiar, like you're being led towards an unhealthy, a worse deal from the outcome because the platform that is calling all of the shots has all of the leverage and power, has all of the data. Ostensibly, the short-form video platforms are peer-to-peer, like user-generated content. You've got, back and forth being able to make videos of your own, responding to communities with influencers or creators who you follow. But in a way, it's not really peer-to-peer, it's really the platform controlling everything. Like the way that doom scrolling works is that it's super effective because the behavioral data that the platform has from the scrolling patterns of all of the users, it can use to deliver the next video on your feed that's like the next potato chip. You can't look away, it's like chosen for you as the video that's gonna make you continue scrolling to the next one as much as possible. Everyone also has a different algorithmic For You page, and you as a user are essentially isolated in the use of your data from all of the other users. You never get to see what's on someone else's For You page, and you aren't really encouraged to look behind the scenes at your own behavioral data. The platform has all of the fine-grained data. They're able to use it all to your own end. And the dividedness of the individual users on the system, is unfortunate, but is to the platform's advantage. So it would be really interesting, it would be, bringing the Web3 values to the social media and attention economy would be to make information diet apps that make use of the individual data that each of the users have, but would allow you to share and get the benefits of sharing of this data and ability to post with other users without waiting for the platforms to give it to us. This is something that we should bring as permissionless innovation. So I'll give two examples of apps that we have in review in the App Store, so these will be dropping very soon, and then I'll tell you about how the TE background enables this. So the first one's called Feedling. It's a virtual pet that consumes the same information diet that you consume. And so the way that this works is it has delegated access to your TikTok watch history, and as you watch videos or like videos or engage with them, if you watch a video of a cat with receiving eye drops, you get a virtual pet that also starts to take on the attributes of the kinds of videos that you watch. So it either gets healthier or unhealthy, depending on if you watch too many violent videos, it's going to be reflected in the attributes that your digital pet takes on. So you can think of this as like a biofeedback mechanism that reveals to you maybe insights that you wouldn't have thought about what your behavioral pattern says to you. The other one is maybe more interesting, is you can almost see how it's almost like an auction kind of application, but in a non-digital assets world. So this is called Sync, and the idea here is that you have a group chat with an AI agent in the group chat that has delegated access again to your watch history on TikTok, and it also can respond to messages that show up in the group chat. And the idea is that this is meant to surface hidden complementarities or matches between the people that you're talking with. So in this example, it's like one of the people in this two-person group chat is basically talking in code that only makes sense if you were basically talking in quotes from a TV show. So this agent would then, informed by the watch history, can say, well, actually, these two people have actually watched the same set of videos. They're kind of binge watching clips from the same TV show. It's interesting to drop a card into the chat and mention that. So, zooming out from this, the idea is that there's some hidden insights that are buried in your private watch history. Nothing about the TikTok platform encourages you or facilitates you to share or aggregate this watch history with anyone else on the platform. And so if you want to be able to get any insights or recommendation benefits from aggregating this watch history together, you have to go off-platform to be able to do that. So here is an illustration of roughly how this works and where TEs come in. And I'll point to an open source version of this that you could look at right now. It's already on GitHub. The basic move here is to use these confidential VM offerings, which are already available on all of the major clouds, and to run whatever browser or mobile OS you would use to connect to this platform. You run that in a TE in this confidential VM platform. This now becomes like your remote operated browser. that then becomes also a secure sandbox for computing on the data that is your data that you access through the platform through your confidential VM running a browser. Nothing about running a browser in a TE even needs to be visible to the platform that you're doing it. Like, the platform doesn't know where your processor is. They know where your IP address is, unless you use a VPN, which you can and should, and many people do anyway. And you can even route the TLS traffic that originates in the remote processor in a confidential VM through the user's own IP address. You can act as like the VPN for your own remote TE sandbox browser. It's also actually a really important idea for the user empowerment view of this, that this should be an open source modular thing. So once you have a browser in a TEE that's capable of collecting your watch history, and you can generalize this to other platforms besides TikTok, just using these examples of watch history to be concrete. Once collecting this data, it's up to you to choose which applications you would delegate that to. So the two examples that I said there, it's your data. You're allowed to take your data and put it in a TE sandbox. And when you have sensitive data in a TE sandbox, you can then participate in applications that don't rely on sharing all of the sensitive data with other users or with anyone in the public, but just use that combined sensitive data for something that actually benefits you or is useful for the people in your peer group. That's the point of that. So I wanted to make sure that I include just some animation just to make use of the cool projection thing. So this is what it looks like. What you're seeing is basically a browser within a browser. So the inside browser is logged into TikTok and is running in a confidential VM. And it's logged into TikTok, and it's essentially, when you visit your watch history page, it makes a log of the watch history that's on your page. That is now stored in a personal data pod. So it's kept confidential, but you can choose to delegate it to any application that you want, such as these ones that would surface insights or otherwise get some benefit of sharing without actually having to give up control of all of your data. You can see the link for that called Teleport Talkscope. So this is some open source code. The tech stack underlying it, maybe the basics of running a browser and being able to control it in different ways. That's familiar to anyone who's playing with AI agent stacks. They're all roughly capable of this. We happen to run this in DStack. That's a software framework on top of Intel TDX, but the core idea works regardless of the cloud provider and regardless of the particular processors. The wide availability that we have now of imperfect but usable now confidential VMs is perfect for this sort of thing. So the key message is that we should be using this technology to do something surprising for it, and especially to take power back from some of the platforms that are otherwise affecting our lives too much. If you are familiar with basic web operations and this idea of having data and then choosing different apps to delegate to, that's obviously reminiscent of OAuth. We give the name OAuth 3 for this open source paradigm, which is a really hilarious choice of name for mainly for the reason that this is an unlicensed standard. Like, if you search for OAuth 3, you just get a page that says, well, the OAuth organization says that OAuth 3 doesn't exist. How unimaginative of them. There's not even a place there for what OAuth 3 could or should be, just it doesn't exist. So it's like an anti-memetic hidden space to be able to put a name. And not only is it an unlicensed name, the whole point of this is that it's not a standard waiting for platforms to adopt it. It's basically just a guidebook of how to, from first principles, do user empowerment of data in the permissionless innovation way, without waiting for the platforms to do it, but rather using these imperfect confidential VM tools to add extra functionality like adversarial interoperability to these platforms. You can read a draft manifesto about this. This session's about new cypherpunk manifestos, so that's submitted for your enjoyment of that. Maybe you enjoy looking at that link and tell me what you think about it. And that's all. Thank you.